Hi, boys and girls. My name is Miss Melissa, and I teach 5th grade at a school called Corrales International. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about the U.S. Census and specifically about a really important word called diversity. So let's start with what the U.S. Census is. The U.S. Census is a count of all the people in a country, and it's carried out every 10 years. We're going to be counted in 2020, so make sure to fill out that U.S. Census if you get it in the mail or if you do it electronically. So I said that the word diversity is a really important word. It is. Diversity basically means different. We have so many different people in the United States. But how does this exactly connect to the U.S. Census? Well, it's related because we will be discussing 3 items: race, language, and education in different states. We found this information because people were counted. So the reason we were able to find out and calculate it is through the U.S. Census, and that's why it's so important to fill it out. So let's talk about race. Race means there are so many different types of races in the United States. Race refers to a person's physical characteristics like skin or facial features or attributes. Language. We speak so many different languages in the United States. In fact, did you know that your state, our home state of New Mexico, has 2 official state languages? That's right, they're both English and Spanish. Lastly, we'll be discussing people's level of education. Now, we'll be looking at how many people have at least something called a bachelor's degree, which is a university degree of at least 4 years. Many people get many different types of degrees. Some are 2 years, some are less than 2 years, some are 4 years, and some are even more than that. Okay, let's look at some information. This information is called data. Data is information in the form of numbers. Let's look at some data from our home state of New Mexico and 3 other states. They're going to be South Dakota, Texas, and New Jersey. Let's start with New Mexico. So when I say the word row, that means information that is horizontal. When I say the word column, that means information that is vertical. So in this row, we have information about American Indian and or Alaskan Natives and how many people are in these states are from this race. From this row, we'll be talking about people that speak a language other than English at home, right here in these 4 states. And in this last row, we'll be talking about people that have a bachelor's degree or more. So let's look at New Mexico. Right here in this color red, we have 10.9%, almost 11% of people are American Indian and Alaskan Native from Native American tribes. 34.8, almost 35% of people speak another language other than English at home. For example, my native language is Spanish, so I do speak it at home, especially when my mom's in town. And 27.1% of people, so 27% of people in New Mexico have a degree of 4 years, which again means that they went to college for at least 4 years. Now, let's look at South Dakota, which is this column right here. So in South Dakota, 8.7 people, almost 9% of their population, are American Indian and or Alaskan Native. 6.4% speak English, another language other than English at home, and 27.8% have at least a 4-year degree. Let's look at one more state. Let's choose Texas because it's right next to us. So only 0.5% are American Indian and Alaskan Native. A big percent, they beat us in speaking another language other than English at home, 35.6, almost by 1 full percent. And they have 38% of people, at least 38.1, that have a bachelor's degree or higher. So now let's answer some questions related to this data. Now, which of the states, remember this is the same data that was represented in the slide before, Which of the states in the table has the highest percentage of American Indians and or Alaskan Natives? So what we're going to do this, we're going to look at this row right here, boys and girls, and we're going to look at all these numbers and compare and contrast them. New Mexico has 10.9, South Dakota 8.7, Texas 0.5, New Jersey 0.2. What's the biggest number? Looks like New Mexico. Next one. Which of the states in the table has the highest percentage of people who speak a language other than English at home? So again, we'll be looking at this row. New Mexico, 34.8, South Dakota, 6.4, Texas, 35.6, New Jersey, 31.8. Looks like Texas barely beats New Mexico with 35.6, just like we said before. Which of the states in the table has the highest percentage of people who have a bachelor's degree or higher? So we'll be looking at this last row right here. We have New Mexico with 27.1, South Dakota with 27.8, Texas with 38.1, and New Jersey with 28.7. Looks like Texas, again, with 38.1 has a degree, people in their population with a bachelor's degree or higher. So, comparing and contrasting, this is one of my favorite things to teach my fifth graders. When we're going to compare and contrast some of that information. Compare means to talk about things that are the same. So, I brought an apple and an orange. So when I compare them, that means that I'm going to talk about the same things that they have. So they're both fruits. Contrast means that we'll be talking about how things are different. So obviously, an apple and an orange are both fruits, but when I contrast them, I'm talking about how they are different. Well, this one is red, this one is orange, this one is an apple, this is also an orange. Now, maybe you've seen something like this before in your classroom. When I compare and contrast information, I like to use a diagram, and it's called a Venn diagram. It's a type of graphic organizer. So we're going to put information that we'll compare and contrast about two things. Just like I compared and contrasted this apple and orange, we're going to compare and contrast New Mexico and South Dakota. NM for New Mexico, SD for South Dakota. So when we compare, it's the same, and you put that information in the middle. When we contrast, it's different, and you put that information on the sides. So let's start with comparing. How are both South Dakota and New Mexico the same? About the same amount of people have a bachelor's degree, and I'm getting that information right here. So New Mexico is 27.1. South Dakota is 27.8. They have 27% just about of people that have a degree of 4 years or higher. Now, let's talk about how they're different. New Mexico has more people that speak another language other than English. We have here that New Mexicans speak 34.8%, while South Dakota only has 6.4 people. Let's talk about something else that's different. In South Dakota, there are less American Indian or Alaskan Natives. So New Mexico has 10.9, almost 11, while South Dakota has 8.7. They're close, but they're still a little bit different. Now, something else I like to teach my fifth graders is transitions. Transitions are words that help us. They're helping words to help us see when we compare and when we contrast. When we compare, I like to use these words in green. Likewise, also, while, in the same way, likewise, like as, similarly, and same. When I contrast, I like to use these words: but, still, although, different, on the other hand, however, yet, otherwise, and even though. It's good to just use one per sentence. So here again are our comparing and our contrasting. We can also write sentences that show similarities by using some of these sentence starters. So let's see if we can compare. So, New Mexico and South Dakota are similar because both of them have a bachelor's degree or higher. Now let's contrast. New Mexico and South Dakota are different because New Mexico has more people that speak English as a second language. So in summary, we learned what diversity means. We learned about race, language, and education. Finally, we learned so much about comparing and contrasting, our special helping words called transitions, and how to make sentences using them. Don't forget to get counted in the 2020 U.S. Census. I'm Miss Melissa, and thank you for joining us today for At Home with APS. Bye.
Good morning, literacy learners, and welcome back to another wonderful episode of At Home with APS, our summer edition. My name is Miss Maggie.
And I'm Miss Mary.
And we are going to be continuing for our very last day for At Home with APS Summer Edition, continuing on our question about what can we do to protect the animals of the world. Before we get started, we have one final message from a librarian here in New Mexico.
And this message is coming to our students at Alvarado Elementary School here in Albuquerque Public Schools from their librarian, Mrs. O'Leary. And she says that she is missing her Alvarado All-Stars and can't wait to share summer favorite reads.
Excellent. So let's go ahead and let's start our lesson.
Well, we've been discussing animals around the world, and our question to really help us to focus our learning has been, what can we do to protect the animals of the world? In yesterday's lesson, you shared some of the problems that our animals around the world are facing, and
That's right.
learned we have a problem.
Yes, we do.
Now, some of the things that you shared with us were the ways that our animals are becoming endangered or are already endangered. Let's review some of those.
Okay.
So we know some of our animals are endangered. Here's why.
One of them is habitat loss, or essentially losing their homes due to things like deforestation.
And
Climate change is another. This is where the environment is changing to where the home is no longer sustainable for the animals to live in.
another.
Pollution is another way that some of our animals are endangered. Pollution can help, my apologies. Pollution actually contributes to habitat loss along with harming some of the animals. It certainly doesn't help them.
And then I remember yesterday you taught us about how sometimes it's the human interactions that cause a problem.
Yes.
What were some of the other things that are causing those problems with our animals around the world?
Well, another one along with that is illegal hunting or poaching
That's
of animals.
right. Now, hopefully with every problem, there's a solution.
That's right. There are many things that we can do to help our animals that are endangered.
Now, on Tuesday, we learned a new word, conservation.
That's right. I remember.
And conservation, we were discussing, those are the things that we can do to help to protect our animals.
Yes.
And that's what we're going to focus on next. So tune in with us, and let's all talk about how we can change this problem. We know that we can help protect the animals of the world. So let's go over 5 simple things that we can all do.
Absolutely.
First, and this came from Brendan Wenzel, the author and illustrator of Hello, Hello. This was the book that we shared on Tuesday. He encouraged us to learn about animals and then to share what we learn with other people.
That's right.
Here's something that occurred to me while you were teaching yesterday, and you were talking about human interactions and how that's part of what the problem is. So one thing that we can do to solve that problem, stay away from animals in the wild. It's
That's
their
right.
home.
Especially if you're going out hiking or on some of those trails near some of our roads.
Be mindful of garbage. So we don't want to litter. We learned pollution is a problem. So here we have a family that's actually picking up other people's trash.
Yes.
Reduce, reuse, and recycle. Boy, that's something I hear a lot around our school when we have those big recycling bins.
Absolutely, yes.
If we can cut down on the amount of garbage that we produce or that we make, then that means that less of that garbage is going to go out into the environment.
Absolutely.
and walk, ride your bike, carpool. The goal is to cut down on the amount of trips that we take in the car. That's one thing that I've noticed since we've been doing a lot more things at home is that people are out riding their bikes and taking walks. It'd be pretty cool if we could continue to do some of that. Now, let's continue to explore this idea of what we can do to protect the animals of the world. We have a new book to read today.
Wonderful. What is it?
Well, it's called Don't Let Them Disappear.
I see.
12 endangered species across the globe. Now, this book was written by Chelsea Clinton, so she's the author. Remember, the author is the one who writes the words. And illustrated by Gianna Marino. So we've talked about the illustrator. That's the job of making the pictures. We talked a lot about illustrations on Tuesday when we looked at the work of Brendan Wenzel with his book, Hello, Hello. Let's also talk about these illustrations today. This book was published by, I think it's Philomel Books. I think that's what it is, but sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. And this book was a fairly new book. It was published in 2019.
Wow.
Now, boys and girls, I am not going to read every page on this book. Instead, what I'm going to do is kind of flip through the pages quickly just to give you an idea of what's in it. I'm only going to really discuss two of the animals because they're two animals that I am particularly interested in. And we'll also discuss some of the important information that we learn. I will begin by reading the introduction because often the introduction is where I learn about why the author is writing the book and what they want us to get out of it. Do you remember what that was called?
I think that is the purpose.
That's right. Let's read. There are animals on every continent and in every ocean on Earth. We've learned that. Tall ones and short ones, massive ones and smaller ones, animals with long necks and long legs, animals that are strong and not so strong. Every animal species is unique and important to life on Earth. Some are almost gone and could become extinct if we don't act now to save them. Let's focus for just a second on that last sentence. Could become extinct if we don't act now to save them. What does that tell you that the author's purpose is?
Well, I think what the author is trying to do is to build some knowledge and awareness about these animals so that way we can take action to save them.
Wait a minute, that reminds me of Hello, Hello.
That does.
Because in his note at the end of the book, Brendan Wenzel talked about how that was his goal, was that we would learn about them and then do something.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, the next thing is a key. And what it does is it tells us about the different levels that the animals are at risk. We're actually going to come back to this. So I'm not going to focus on this right now.
Okay.
And then I'll just tell you about how the pages are laid out. On one side, there's a paragraph that gives us information about the animal. And then on the other side, it tells us where they live, what their endangered status is. So how bad is it for them? And then it tells us why. So some of the things that you discussed yesterday were the why they were endangered.
Yes.
This book does that as well. There's another connection that we just made. Now, this is one of the ones that I do want to read to you. And the reason I want to read it to you is because it's about gorillas, and I am particularly interested in gorillas. I really love learning about monkeys and apes and other primates. So let's spend a moment and read this one. Waking up with the sun, gorillas leave their nests to find food before they'll need to rest again as the day heats up. While gorillas mainly eat plants, they sometimes snack on small insects too. It's hard work gathering the dozens of pounds of food that adult gorillas need to consume each day. Gorilla moms carry their babies on their chests or backs, and a troop of gorillas communicate by using sounds and facial expressions similar to the way that we do.
Wow.
That makes me want to connect even more to that animal. In captivity, so that means when they're in zoos, for example, some gorillas have even been taught to use sign language. Language is not the only thing that humans and gorillas share. Gorillas can also catch human diseases, such as a cold, which can be deadly.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Well, and that answers one of the questions that I had yesterday. Do you remember? I wasn't sure what the problem was with human interaction. Well, now we know. And then there's a message. And by the way, this message is repeated on every page. Don't let them disappear. I skipped something that I have to go back to. I'm not very good about tapping this board.
That's okay.
So now it tells us over on the left side as we're looking at this, the range. That means where they live. They live in central sub-Saharan Africa. Then the endangered status. And as I mentioned, we're actually going to come back to that. They're critically endangered. That sounds pretty bad.
That sounds very serious to me.
Okay. And then why? Habitat destruction, which is habitat loss, so they're losing their habitats. Poaching, that illegal hunting part, and war.
Wow.
Now, these next few pages, I'm going to just flip through. I am not going to take the time to read them right now, but I'm guessing that you are interested in some of these animals, so I would love to encourage you to find this book in your local library so that you can read it on your own. Blue whales, rhinoceroses. We were discussing how we actually say that.
Did you? Oh, there it is.
Okay. Giant pandas. Whale sharks. This was one of my son's favorite animals when he was growing up. They're very interesting. Polar bears. Lions. Sea otters. Aren't they cute?
I love sea otters.
Okay, this is one that I'm going to read, orangutans. And the reason that I'm going to read them is because they are a type of ape, and I find them very interesting. But there's a problem. Now this time, let's start on the left side. They live in Sumatra, which is Indonesia, and Borneo, which is Indonesia and Malaysia. You can kind of look at the pictures and get some information about their type of habitat. What would you say their type of habitat is?
It looks like some kind of a forest. And based on the shape of the leaves that I see in the illustration, it kind of looks like it's a very tropical and green forest.
Okay. We might get some confirmation when we read. We'll have to see.
Okay.
But that could be a question that we form now. What type of forest do they live in?
Absolutely.
Endangered status. Again, they're critically endangered. We're going to talk more about what that means for them. And then why habitat loss and poaching. But only the Bornean orangutans are being poached. So that's kind of an interesting fact to know. Let's read more. As the sun sets, orangutans prepare nests in the trees. Gorillas did that too. They prepared nests also.
I remember that from when you read that one earlier.
Okay, I'm going to start again because I got myself sidetracked. I do that sometimes. As the sun sets, orangutans prepare nests in the trees, sometimes building roofs to cover the mattresses that they've woven out of branches and leaves.
Wow.
Like us, orangutans prefer to sleep in protected spaces. Unlike us, their arms are longer than their bodies to help them navigate from branch to branch, tree to tree. Orangutans tend to spend more time on their own than in groups, and much of that time is spent climbing, sitting, and swinging high above the ground. When a congress of orangutans is together, they communicate with sounds, facial expressions, and gestures just like we do. Their similarities to us are reflected in their name. Orangutan means person of the forest in Malay, the language that's spoken. in the orangutans' native Malaysia.
Oh.
Don't let them disappear. So we didn't get the answer to the question of what kind of forest. What could I do if I still wanted an answer to that question?
Well, we could look at other books, or we could even look on the internet.
Okay, great. Well, let's keep going. Flip through a few more pages, and then we'll wrap up our book. Tigers, elephants, and then we're going to come to the closing of our book. Let's make a pledge as fellow inhabitants of planet Earth that we won't let any of these species disappear. Okay. Now, there's a whole back section to this book that I wanted to discuss with you. First, it's why they're endangered. This goes through a lot of the things that we've already discussed and that you discussed yesterday with us. And then there's a what you can do part. We're going to come back to that. And then they have some special days that are set aside to celebrate animals. For example, let's see, we are in June, and let's see, what day in June is this? Actually, we're in July right now. It's July 9th on the day that this is being broadcast. Well, next week, July 14th, Shark Awareness Week.
Wow.
Okay, something to keep in mind. Now, this is the why they're endangered. I'm not going to read this, but we'll see if there's anything that we haven't covered. So global warming, that's climate change. Water pollution. Overfishing, I remember you discussed that.
Yes.
Poaching, that's the illegal hunting. And then clearing land for farming and building things. That's the habitat loss that we've been talking about. And then it says all these things can be changed, though, and if we all work together to make those changes, eventually these animals won't be endangered anymore. So that's our goal. Okay. What can we do? If you and your family want to help animals like the ones in this book, here are some things that you can do. And we actually talked about a lot of these already.
Yes.
Talk to your friends about the animals in this book and why they're special. That reminds me of what Brendan Wenzel said also.
That's right. It was in his book.
Yeah, he encouraged us to learn about them and talk about them. Support zoos, visit animals there. Tell your family that they should not buy jewelry, trophies, or anything else that's made from endangered animals. That kind of comes back to that poaching idea.
Yes, it does.
Recycle whenever you can to fight global warming. Never throw trash in the ocean or anywhere but into a recycling bin or a trash can. Help plant trees in your community to fight climate change. And celebrate animals on their special day.
Miss Mary, can I add in something?
Please do.
So as I was building my background knowledge for this week, there was a lot of information about zoos and their conservation efforts. And there are a lot of great organizations out there that provide conservation efforts for animals. However, there are zoos out there and aquariums still that don't always follow the best conservation practices. So if you're curious to know where some great places are, you'll want to visit the Association for Zoos and Aquariums to find out their list of approved zoos and aquariums for conservation.
I am so glad to get that recommendation. Thank you, because sometimes we don't know when we're doing the wrong thing. Maybe by supporting a group that isn't necessarily doing the right thing. Now, let's move on. And I want to spend a few minutes, again, coming back to making some connections. Connecting the book that we just read, Don't Let Them Disappear, to the book that we read on Tuesday, Hello, Hello. Let's think. We already named a few ways that we were making connections, but really let's focus in. And the way that we're going to focus in is with some guiding questions. We're going to ask why. Why did the authors write the book? So that was the author's purpose. We are also going to ask what. What information did they share? So what were those main ideas and those details that they gave us? Now we're going to divide that into two sections. First, we want to know what was the information about the animals, and also what was the information about the conservation things that we could do.
Got it.
And the how. So how did they share that information with us? We learned that word how on Monday or on Tuesday. What was that?
Presentation.
Presentation. How they shared that is the presentation part.
That's right. We did that on Tuesday.
Tuesday, thank you. It seems like such a long time ago. And we talked about Brendan Wenzel's method of presentation was to show a lot of pictures,
Yes.
but not necessarily a whole lot of words. So let's focus on that as we compare the two books. This time, to compare our books, we are going to use something called a chart.
Okay. How will a chart help us, Miss Mary?
Now, you all know, because you saw how I acted when I saw too much information on Tuesday morning. There were all those pictures of all those animals, and my brain needed to kind of group that information a little bit better. This is a way of grouping that information or information that we're getting a little bit better. It organizes it into boxes.
I see. So that'll help me make connections between the two stories.
Right. Some things may be the same between the stories. Some things may be different between the two stories. And being able to see that information clearly in the box will help my brain to understand it better. So we'll start with the author's purpose. So in the two books, and I'm going to actually put them up here for us so that we can really keep our focus on them. Don't let them disappear, and hello. The author's purpose. Can you help me to make some connections with what we learned there?
Well, both books talked about animals that were endangered.
Right. So you know what I'm going to do? To show that it was both books, I'm actually going to draw an arrow.
Oh.
So both of them talked about animals that were endangered, and the authors told us that they wanted us to do something.
Absolutely.
What did they want us to do?
They want us to take action.
Take action. All right. So take some sort of action to help the animals. I'm not doing a great job with writing on this today.
That's okay.
Now, let's move on to talking about the presentation part. That's the how they presented. Miss Maggie, one of them used a lot of pictures. The other one also used a lot of pictures, but had also more words. Oh, but there's one way that they were the same. Maybe we should start with how they were the same. They're both picture books.
That's right.
So I'm going to let you do the writing because you tend to do a better job at that. So let's draw an arrow and say that they're both picture books. But they weren't the same in every way with the presentation, were they?
No, they were not.
One way that they were different was that Brendan Wenzel's book didn't have a whole lot of words. Do you remember he said, like, hello spots, hello stripes. But the other book that we did today had a paragraph on each page and then facts on each page. So this one had a lot more words. Oh, here was something else that I noticed. In Hello, there was really no information about the habitats. It was just the animal on a white background or animals on a white background. So the focus was really on the animals. But in Don't Let Them Disappear, in each picture or illustration, the habitat was drawn into the background.
That's right. I remember that.
Okay, so
There are some things that were the same and different. Helps us to make some connections. Let's move on.
Okay.
What we learned. Well, in both of them, we got some tips about animals, information. But you know what? Brendan Wenzel really didn't give us any facts about those animals, did he? So both had the information, but
Okay.
Brendan Wenzel just names the animals. Remember in that section in the back where he had the numbers
That's right.
with the animals and told us their names in case we wanted to learn more? Also, Hello, Hello focused on a lot of animals.
Yes, it did.
There were 92 animals shown in this book. Am I reading that correctly? I think I am. 92 animals. But this one only had 12. And we learned a lot more facts. As you already said, this one, we learned facts about the animals, not just their names. Okay. Miss Maggie, what are you thinking so far of our chart? Is this helping you?
It does. I'm building some direct connections between both of the books.
Now let's keep going, and let's focus now on the information about conservation. Now I'm thinking back to that author's purpose that Brendan Wenzel wrote, and I remember he had about a sentence or maybe two about the things that we could do. Learn about the animals. Oh, they both wanted us to learn about the animals. That
That's
was
right.
a start for both of them. But Brendan Wenzel had that paragraph in which he talked about some things. Now, the other book by Chelsea Clinton gave us a whole list of things.
That's right.
In fact, she almost had a whole page about things with very specific things that we could do to help those animals. So they both gave us the ideas, but the way that they gave us the ideas was different, right? All right. Wow, these books were connected in a lot of ways. They both encouraged us to take action to help the animals. They were both picture books. They both gave us information about the animals with ideas about ways to help. But the ways that they did these things were very different.
That's right.
Brendan Wenzel used fewer words. Chelsea Clinton used a lot of facts and details. I think with both of them, though, we came away with that message of we've got to do something to stop this, to stop losing our animals because of things that we're doing.
That's right.
Well, I think we're ready to move on.
I think so too.
So let's turn the page. Thank you. Thank you. And move on to some of those words that we skipped right at the very beginning.
That's right.
So they were words that all talk about animals being endangered, but they have slightly different meanings. So today I want to focus on how do I understand the differences between words that are almost the same, but not quite. So let's be some word detectives. These were the words that were listed in that first page, which I'm not going to turn to right now, in that key that I skipped. They talked about different levels of being endangered.
That's right.
So there was not vulnerable, nearly vulnerable, vulnerable, endangered, critically endangered, extinct in the wild, and extinct. Now, we've already explored some of these words, haven't we?
Yes, we have. A couple of them at least.
So let's start with endangered. We knew that endangered animals are in danger.
That's right.
Okay, well, critically endangered, I know critical means, well, it's pretty bad. Then vulnerable, we haven't talked about that word. But we have talked about extinct.
Yes.
you talked about that word.
That's right.
What was that?
Extinct means that the species has died out, that it does not exist anymore on the planet.
So they're gone.
That's right.
Gone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There are no more left.
But there's also extinct in the wild. What do you think that means?
So the difference is that extinct in the wild means that you can't find that animal anymore in its natural habitat. It's
Okay.
only available to see in zoos through the conservation efforts of others.
Okay. All right. Well, I think I'm kind of getting a picture here.
Mm-hmm.
But as we know about Miss Mary, she needs pictures.
That's right.
So let's just kind of take a look, but not spend a whole lot of time. Not vulnerable. That's most animals, it says. So what I know about the word vulnerable is that little bit of danger, but not really. So not vulnerable, they're not in danger.
That's right.
Okay, nearly vulnerable, getting a little bit closer. Vulnerable. It says if nothing's done, they could go extinct in 100 years or so. Endangered, we know that one. Critically endangered, it's getting worse. They could be extinct in 10 years.
That's right.
And then extinct, you've already discussed. Let's use this.
Oh, I see what you're doing, Miss Mary.
You see it? So here I am. On one side, I'm crying. Very sad. Why do you think I could be sad?
Well, I would be sad if I thought an animal species had become extinct,
You're right.
that they were gone.
Also notice I've used a red sign here. That red sign goes stop. So we're going to put the word extinct here.
I see.
Would you mind coming in and writing in extinct over here while I switch sides with you? And we're going to kind of have to do this little dance today, Miss Maggie, to make sure that we keep our distance from each other.
That's okay.
And then on the other side, look at me, I'm pretty happy about this one. I'm feeling pretty good about this one. What do you think this one could be?
Well, if extinct is on this side, talking about the words we went through, that would probably be not vulnerable.
You're right, not vulnerable. So that means that they're not right now in danger. Whoops.
There should be an eraser right there. Perfect.
It's not great, but it'll work.
That's right.
You might just need to do all the writing today because Miss Mary is having a hard time. Not vulnerable. All right.
Perfect.
Do you remember what the step was before extinct? We could always bring the book back.
I do actually remember. It's because the last step before being completely extinct is that it's extinct in its natural habitat, in the wild.
That's right. So if you can squeeze that in there, extinct in the wild. So not quite so bad, but still bad. And on mine, it went from not vulnerable. The next one was nearly vulnerable. So I'm going to start with the word nearly. So not great. Vulnerable. Okay. Okay, now we're kind of coming in from both sides. We still have vulnerable.
Yes.
That one is still in the green, but kind of more in the middle in our range of a problem here.
I see.
From not bad to really bad.
Absolutely.
Now, we still have two more. One of them is endangered,
Yes.
and one of them is critically endangered. Which one do you think is worse?
I think critically endangered would be worse, simply because that critically means serious.
Okay, so I would agree. Let's put critically endangered over on that side.
Critically endangered.
And that means that the last one, not happy about this, but we still have a chance to change it.
And that's the thing, students. With the exception of extinct, there are always opportunities to help move species of animals that are in these more critical areas to be not vulnerable.
So let's make that our goal, to move on beyond this and get them all back over to not being endangered.
Absolutely.
Now, it's time for us to move on. We've gone through our helping us to understand. We're now going to move into our high frequency words, or our popcorn words. And since it is summer,
Yes.
and we want our kiddos to really enjoy their summertime and also keep up with learning their high frequency words, I've got some suggestions for you today that don't involve practicing writing on paper necessarily.
Oh, what
But
other
maybe.
ways are those?
Well, I'm going to talk to our students about illustrating their words.
Wow, that sounds like fun.
Well, it is fun. And we've talked about illustrations. Those are the pictures in books. So now we're going to make illustrations of our popcorn words. Let me show you some examples.
Okay.
But first, let's do a quick review of what our popcorn words are.
Got it.
Were, what, and there. Okay, you with me? To do this, use whatever art supplies that you have at home. If you have any, you could use crayons or markers, colored pencils, any paper that you've got, although I will tell you that I actually pulled some of our paper out of the recycling bin. Also, recycled materials could be really helpful with this, and I'll show you one that I did with all recycled materials.
Perfect.
Let's start with what I call rainbow writing. And I've actually got the original one that I did here.
That's beautiful.
Well, what I like about rainbow writing is that with rainbow writing, you write the word over and over again, but with different colors. And I like that because it helps to get that word and that writing practice, but in a really fun way.
Absolutely.
So rainbow writing is one idea that you could try with crayons, markers, colored pencils, paint.
Ooh, that would be fun.
It could be fun to even do that like with finger paint.
That's a good idea.
Now, let's keep going. Here's another one. What? This one looks like I did everything by hand and I did little circles and then I colored in the circles.
Oh,
I actually didn't.
what did you do?
I did it partly on the computer.
Really?
I did. It was a lot of work. But do you remember that Brendan Wenzel, part of his illustrations were done on the computer?
That's right, it was.
So I mixed things. I did computer, and then I took my markers and I just colored in circles. It was pretty fun. It was actually a very calming activity and kind of a hectic day. Let's keep going, and let's see if you can spot the recycled materials. You can see my glue wasn't quite dry when I took this picture. It's dry now. Here it is. What did I use?
You used recycled pieces of paper, and it looks like brown paper bags?
Yep. So all of these materials came from projects that we used.
I see.
This piece of paper bag was from when we did the coyote who swallowed the flea and we made the puppet.
That's right.
And then these little squares, those are all from our phonics cards.
Oh, the extra pieces of paper we cut out.
I just cut them into little squares, and then I used glue to write out the words and stuck those little squares on. Actually, more challenging than you would expect.
How creative.
So, kiddos, I would encourage you to have some fun with your popcorn words. Figure out different ways that you can make them. We're going to move on to our writing, and we're going to have a quick discussion of presentation.
Absolutely.
Now, we've learned about the steps of writing, getting our ideas, writing a rough draft, revising and editing, moving into getting ready to share. When we share, we talked about knowing our purpose, thinking about how to make it easier for our readers, and thinking about how to keep our readers interested. So let's go through what I call the 3 Ps of our presentation. Plan.
Perfect.
So choose something that works best for you.
Absolutely. And be as creative as you'd like to be.
So you might choose to do something digitally, like on the computer, or talking, giving a presentation, making something, or even writing something out. Do you notice that there's a question mark?
I do.
Because you, as the author, get to decide how you share your work.
Absolutely.
Next, prepare. Now, Miss Maggie, it takes time.
Yes, it does.
This is not something that should be rushed, and it should be your best work. This is where you really focus on things like handwriting. And then practice. Practice, 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 especially if you're going to be talking. So let's go through just a couple of tips. We are having to talk.
Yes.
What do you suggest they do?
Well, when you're speaking in front of others, it's helpful to look at your audience, connect with them, and definitely be proud. Stand up, be open, and make sure that they can hear you. Be proud of the work that you've done.
Miss Maggie, a lot of times when I'm in a classroom, and of course my classroom now is huge because my classroom is a library, when students speak, they speak very quietly. Could you even hear that?
It was hard for me to hear.
Well, and luckily in here we have microphones, but in
Yes.
classrooms and libraries we don't most of the time. So think about projecting your voice. A lot of times what I will do if I'm speaking to a big group is I'll actually speak to the very last person that I can see so that I make sure that my voice reaches that last person.
And remember, everything that we're telling you are recommendations. You can present this in ways that are culturally relevant to you and ways that make you the most comfortable.
Something else that I do, if I know that there are going to be words that I might stumble over, I practice those words. Sometimes before we start filming, I even practice them with Miss Maggie.
It's a good idea to practice some of those.
Yeah, and then I still stumble, and that's okay. That's all that we have today for
Oh
this
my
very
goodness.
last lesson.
We did so much today. We took a look at some solutions to how we can help endangered animals. We read a story about those endangered animals. We talked about the shades of meaning, all the different ways that you could look at an endangered species. We practiced our high frequency words and talked about giving a presentation with some of the writing that you've done this summer. Today is our last episode of filming, and it will be the last day of At Home with APS for us. We wanted to take a minute to just thank all of the people that made At Home with APS Summer Edition possible. All of our videographers, our technology crew, our directors, the curriculum and instruction department at Albuquerque Public Schools, along with the support from some of our other departments in Albuquerque Public School leadership. We also wanted to thank our colleagues that are teaching the English language arts from 3rd grade to 5th grade and the mathematics K through 5 as well, because they have also done a phenomenal job in all of their episodes this summer. And of course, Miss Mary, we want to thank you for joining us for this summer edition as well.
Well, it was a lot of fun, and I had so much fun working with you and teaching with you. I learned so much about the different ways to share information with our students, not only in Albuquerque Public Schools, but across the state, across the country, and even in other parts of the world. That's pretty exciting.
Absolutely. Remember, you can still access many of these episodes on the APS YouTube channel. We wanted to thank you once again for joining us today for At Home with APS Summer Edition. This has been Miss Maggie
And Miss Mary.
Have a wonderful rest of your summer. Bye.